The Marinade.
There's no O in Marinade. Let's try it one more time. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
The Marinade. Marrow.
Marinade.
Bone marinade. The
That's
Marinade.
The Marinade. With Jason Earle. Welcome to The Marinade with Jason Earle, a free-flowing conversation about the creative process with creative people. This is episode 131, and our guest is Lauren Morrow. Lauren is a singer and songwriter from Atlanta, Georgia, who now makes her home in Nashville, Tennessee. She made a name for herself as the frontwoman for the Whiskey Gentry, a beloved Georgia band that formed in 2009. The band released 3 full-length studio records and a live album between 2011 and 2017, and now we're being treated to Lauren's excellent solo debut called People Talk. The record comes out on Friday, March 31st on Big Kitty Records. This was a special conversation, y'all, and I am so excited to bring it to you. Everyone, my conversation with Lauren Morrow.
Closed doors, unseen. Everybody's tough behind a screen. But who cares what they say? It's nothing but noise. Some people just want their voice to be heard. They'll speak the loudest by saying no word.
So
That's annoying.
I know.
So, does the mic sound okay? Do I need to like come closer to something or?
No, you sound fine. We've recorded many an episode on people's Mac microphones, and it sounds fine, and no one cares.
Okay.
It's you and I right now, just being a little bit, particular. People
Neurotic.
listening- Yeah, exactly. People listening are going to
Just
be
want
like,
to be professional.
I know, I understand. But you are not a professional podcaster. You're a professional songwriter with a wonderful new record coming out. So let's talk about that and not worry about how it sounds. Okay.
Okay, let's move on.
I'm so excited for this, Lauren. I was thinking about it. I've wanted to have you on for a while. I actually told you this to your face at Will's Pub a few years ago. I think I've been trying to chase down this show. I can't find it on the internet anywhere. I don't know if I'm remembering this correctly or not, but I swear my introduction to your music was the Whiskey Gentry playing at Burrow Bar in Jacksonville circa like 2012. It was this tiny little club in downtown Jacksonville. I think you were on like a co-headlining bill with Have Gun Will Travel. Or maybe they opened for you. I don't remember. I may be making this up. Does that sound right?
That definitely sounds right. The Burrow Bar, gosh, all those days with Have Gun Will Travel were such a blur. They were so fun, but maybe like too much fun.
Yeah.
Jacksonville, I can't remember Burrow Bar. But it would have definitely been with Have Gun Will Travel because we did so much touring with them with Whiskey Gentry and always did Florida with them. So we definitely did a memorable show in Gainesville, at a small pub there. But yeah, I mean, it would have been years ago, over a decade ago now.
Yeah, this is like 2012, I'm pretty sure. And I'm almost positive it was at Burrow Bar, which also had changed names a few times. So maybe it was still the London Bridge at that time or something. I don't know. But that memory that I have, and Matt Burke's been on the show twice. Everybody listening knows I'm a huge Have Gun fan. I love them, but like I was captivated by you. You specifically, your band was awesome. Your band was great, but you and I've gotten to see you since then, solo with a band, but at you played their, I want to say it was their, speaking of Have Gun, their record release show when Strange Chemistry came out. It was a show at
Yeah.
Will's. I'm pretty sure that's what it was, and I got to meet you briefly, and you were such a delight to get to talk to. And so I say all that to say I'm really excited to talk to you because I've been a fan for a while, and I'm really fired up to have you on the show.
Thank you. Well, I'm very excited to be here. I was looking through your podcast, people who've been on the podcast in the past, and a lot of them are, people I've become friends with here living in Nashville, but then also, Florida connections too. So, and of course, like love Matt Burke to death, from Have Gun Will Travel. Those guys are like, like brothers to us. We shared a really special time in our lives together, and I just feel so close to them. I love them.
Well,
So
that time in my life was special too. And not that I wasn't doing this yet. I wasn't even really writing about music much, a little bit. But it really wasn't that world. But that time that I'm talking about, that you guys were playing together so much was really special to me too. So I'm curious for you, like, what was it about that time? Because I also think there was something special in the air about the kind of umbrella, Americana umbrella music that you make. Although we'll get into that with this new record because there's so many other wonderful things on it too. But what was it about that time that was special?
well, so like personally, I think, we had just gotten Whiskey Gentry kind of off the ground. Jason and I had just gotten married. And we were, touring, which is all we like at the time had thought we wanted to do, like, let's get in the van. And like, it was just like such a sweet, like, camaraderie between all of us and Whiskey Gentry, and so exciting and everything, even though it was like, looking back on it, Jason and I will laugh because we'll be like, oh my God, like we had like no money. We had, we're like, but we were doing that thing, that I feel like when you start a band when you're young, it's like that thing that you want to do. And it's like, you want to drive up and be like, in New York and like, partying, but also maybe not knowing you're sleeping. And like, I don't know, it was just such a fun time. We just really felt like we were moving towards like our dreams in some way. And then music wise, it was interesting for us too. And I don't like mean for this to sound the way that it might come out, but like, I agree with you in that, at that time period, it was like the Avett brothers were just kind of getting started, and like Mumford and Sons and Have Gun Will Travel was doing their, and we were doing our thing. And like, there was all this kind of like, maybe like old time or bluegrass, influence with different instrumentation, but then you had this kind of like punk rock background to it as well. And it did feel like we were doing something a little different. And then all of a sudden it felt like there was so many bands that had the word whiskey in them, in their name, and it felt like it, and that was a hard thing to kind of justify for me personally, whenever I felt like Americana did start to kind of rise as a genre, and I felt like Whiskey Gentry was overlooked in it for a really long time. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it started too soon. It also, Whiskey Gentry never had really Spotify. We had different ways of like putting music out then. I think Have Gun Will Travel was the same way. We were right, like with our first records on the cusp of like before digital music like became the thing it is now. And so it made it feel a little bit more grassroots, a little bit more like we're trading shows. You have to come up here to Atlanta. And I don't know if that makes any sense, but like, it was just a little more like organic or like naive in some way. I don't know, just different.
Do you think there was any, because I think also Isbell Southeastern to me is like the moment where that sort of Americana thing becomes a different thing. And I want somebody to more capable than me to write the book about that time. Cause like, or somebody pay me to do it. Not as well. Not as well as somebody like Marissa or Moss could do it or whatever. But
Yeah.
but I'd rather Marissa write the book. But
Yeah.
do you think there may have been something, because all those other bands you just mentioned, those are a bunch of dudes. Do you think there was anything to Whiskey
Yeah.
Gentry being female fronted that maybe y'all didn't get the same traction as an Avett Brothers for a similar reason, or for that reason?
Yeah, I mean, I always did sometimes feel that way, and it created a chip on my shoulder that I carried up until really I moved to Nashville,
Mm.
because I would see other women succeeding in that genre, and I would feel like, well, why not me? Or, and it made me kind of jealous and bitter about being a woman in the genre. Um, because I did feel, like I had worked hard and I had done all these things, but then come to find out now through this whole process of releasing this record, like I had no idea what hard work was. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I do think some of that is that. I mean, I had, some of Jason's close friends in Atlanta would be like, man, I don't want to listen to a chick band.
Yeah.
And that was shitty, because it was
Yeah.
like, okay, well, you're totally missing like everything else that's happening here and letting like my voice define everyone else. But I don't know. Yeah, maybe so. I hadn't really thought about it like that before, but maybe that was it.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, because I'm not in your shoes, so I really don't
Yeah.
know. But I think from my perspective, as someone who has kind of approached music journalistically for the last, 8 or 9 years, and in talking with both women and men, and maybe part of it's fresh because I did just talk to Marissa R. Moss, for example, about her book, Her
Yeah.
Country. And so, and then shortly before that, I talked to Michaela Ann, and that was right after all these abortion bans. And,
Yeah.
it's just at the forefront of my mind right now is gender, how artists are perceived, how they are, whether or not they're accepted, based on these immutable characteristics, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
your songs are great, and you're an incredible performer. You're so good live. I mean, Lauren, you are special live, right? And
Thank you.
yeah, and I think, for folks listening, if you ever get a chance to see Lauren, you got to do it. I mean, it's just truly a presence on stage. And but I just wonder, when I think about that time, like, the truth is, a lot of the bands that I was listening to were white dudes. They really
Yeah.
were. And I don't know whether that was anything conscious that I was doing necessarily, or that's what was being served up to me or whatever. But I do think of that time as a special time. And, since then, as you mentioned, like, the genre has expanded and exploded, and there are so many contributions from all kinds of different folks. But I don't know. I was just wondering about that.
I think too, like
Sorry.
lyrically, but just to kind of add to that, but like, having a female lyricist, maybe that was part of it too, in some way, that there was less about, whiskey drinking and more about feelings or something. I don't know, if that was any different, but yeah, I hadn't really thought about it, but I do think now that you're saying it, that there was probably some that played into that, that was,
Yeah. Well, I
that-
think that point, especially as a young man, I sort of justified not listening to as many women, because I think, and maybe there's some validity to this, is that I think my attitude was, I know, like, I can put myself so easily in Jason Isbell's shoes, like,
totally. Yeah,
we're
I get
about the
that.
same age, we grew up in similar places,
Yeah,
and there is some validity to, those kinds of things, like,
totally.
that reality. But also, by only consuming the things that I can easily grasp onto, then I'm really limiting myself, right? So I feel
Yeah,
like, as a
totally.
comfort thing, I go back to a lot of white dudes with guitars because I am one, and because it, it's comfortable to me. Like, hey, he's going through the
Yeah.
same shit.
Right.
And, but
Right.
at the same time, I'm severely limiting myself if I'm only listening to, guys who grew up in the same environments that I did.
Right.
You know?
No, I get it. I mean, there's definitely a big difference between listening to like, Ben from Lucero versus Lauren Morrow from Whiskey Gentry, in terms of like lyrical things, it's
Yeah.
definitely going to be, and yeah, but I get that. I have to do that with my own self and kind of take myself out of certain holes that I can get kind of stuck in with things that I listen to, because it does feel comfortable, and I have to push myself outside of, like, Lauren, you can't listen to just like New Order all the time. Like, listen to something else, whatever. So.
Okay. So many great things I want to ask you about then, because you just mentioned New Order, and I do want to get in a second into the sounds I hear on your record, People Talk, in just a second. And I think I'm gonna coin a description of you that I think hopefully you'll like, and it sticks and everyone runs with it. But before we get to that, you mentioned hard work, and that I think your words were that you didn't know hard work until you were putting together this record. Can you talk about that and what was going on there?
Yeah, so Jason and I moved to Nashville in 2017, and when I lived in Atlanta and grew up there, I had a very um like I said, kind of this like attitude of like, I don't need to move to Nashville. I don't need to do this. I can do this from here.
Mm.
Um
Mm.
and felt like because there were sacrifices that I had made, maybe something was owed to me. And but the real sacrifices came, like when Jason and I decided to move here. Jason had a really successful painting and construction business in Atlanta, and then we had Whiskey Gentry, which had done really well for us, although we were starting to see at the time that the arc was kind of coming downward, and that there were just differences that artistically between us that we wanted to explore. So we got here, and like just first of all, like realizing that there is so much talent that exists here, but also that just because your neighbor is talented doesn't mean that you aren't, and that there's a community of people here that help you and are there for you. And it was really jarring at first, and I felt like you can't really be that nice, like, but they are. And then but then on top of that, it was like having to start from scratch. It was like rebranding everything, moving things over from Whiskey Gentry, having people leave because we left Whiskey Gentry, and people who weren't interested anymore, and having to learn how to find my voice in front of a room full of professional musicians and say like, wait, these are my songs, and they're looking at me like, how do you want this to go? And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know. No one's really let me speak before. And like, and then also like having to learn a side of the music industry and network with people and learn what publishing is, and there was just so much growth and learning about music when we moved here. It felt like and it still feels that way, that every part of my life here revolves around music, which is amazing. And putting out this record, going back, this all kind of ties back into this, is that like we started recording this record in 2019 in November, and then the pandemic happened the very next year in March. And so like, you feel like you've got this momentum, you've got all these things building, and then all of a sudden this hits, and it's like, do you have the fortitude to kind of like last through this and like keep pushing forward? Or do you just like say, this is too hard, I don't know, like this, everything's gone as we know it, will it ever come back? Having to create an income through that in order to continue to work on our record, which like, Jason started another painting business here in Nashville that's done well, thankfully. And we also sold marijuana during the pandemic to like help get our record out, and like, which is illegal, but it's like all the things that we had to do to hustle. We had to go play down on Broadway before the pandemic for 4 hours and maybe make $30. And for people who don't give a shit about you, and just, it was humbling, but not in a way that like destroyed you. It just made you more motivated because everyone else is doing it here too. So it felt uplifting and exciting, even though it's hard, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot, Lauren. That sounds like, I mean, how were you, especially that moment where you start to make the record and the world shuts down, and you've made this enormous move in 2017. You're not that far away from that move. That's a big thing. You're kind of, sounds like you're rethinking the whole thing, at that time. What'd you do mental health wise? Like, how did you maintain during that time?
Funny you should ask. No, but for real though, I've struggled with anxiety my entire life. It is something that I think I'm genetically predisposed to, but also growing up with a mom who was an addict, and and a parent whose marriage was erratic and fucked up, and like, it just makes you kind of have your head on a swivel all the time. And so there was just a lot that I had never really dealt with. And then when we moved here, there's a great place called Porter's Call, which is it's free for artists if you can prove that you're a touring artist, and that's how you make your living. And so I started going to therapy there, and then I hit a really, really low point in January of 2019, and I finally I was like, I have to go talk to I've got to get on some type of medication. And so I did end up getting on an SSRI, and of course have gone through, different variations of like medication. But it's been really helpful for me, and I found something now that I really like, and I've gotten off of it before and then realized that was a mistake. And and still like trying to just do what I can to help myself mentally. And some of that is just like doing a lot of spiritual work. And that also happened when we moved here. I had a total paradigm shift in my spirituality, and that really threw me for a loop. And I felt like I was losing my mind, and that there were things talking to me, and I still feel that way, but I don't feel crazy about it anymore. But like, it was a lot, there was just a ton of growth that happened in a quick time period, but that, I think that's it set me up in a way, I think now perfectly for hopefully what's ahead. Cause I don't think that I could have handled anything when I was in my late 20s, early 30s in regards to any of this stuff and the pressure of it all and all that,
Yeah. You're hitting on all of my favorite things. This is great.
It's my Mercury's in Cancer, so I can go really deep really quickly.
Oh, hell yes. That's what we do here. So
yeah,
that spirituality thing, could you say more about that? Sort of that paradigm shift that you mentioned?
Yeah, so I grew up in a Christian household. My grandfather was a deacon in the Baptist church. I started to have questions about all of that when I was young. And then we stopped going to church. And then when I was in college, I was really into science, and I wanted to switch to be a physics major, but then quickly realized that I'm horrible at math. So that wasn't good. So, it was hard for me to balance like my belief in science and also my belief that, and my feeling internally that there's something else around us all the time that's there for us and helping us. And I stopped calling and referring it to God, even though I refer to it a little bit more that way now, because God in that had this connotation in my brain of something from my childhood that didn't feel right to me. So it became a lot about energy and source. And I got really into crystals, which like I know now you can like buy them at Urban Outfitters and shit, which is kind of strange, but whatever. But like I was like seeking out certain ones for certain properties that they may have to help me. And I always had them in my pockets when I would go out in Nashville to kind of help me get through anxiety or find confidence or whatever. And then I just started reading more into like, 4D, 5D, just all kinds of stuff. You know, it can sound like super woo woo and, you know, like
Mhm.
a little nuts, but yeah, it's a lot. I mean, it's probably too much to put into words for you right now, but it's a lot of like, I don't know, like energy and just and feeling really, I think it's a lot of like intuition based too, and really trying to
Mm.
like think about what feels right, what doesn't feel right, why doesn't that feel right, where is it not feeling right in my body, like is it making me feel, you know, like tight in my chest and my heart or head, or you know, like things like that. Just trying to be more aware of what's around me
So
energetically,
many
I guess.
there's just so many connections. I mean, so I also grew up in the Baptist church, deeply scarred from it, unpack it in
Yeah,
therapy twice a week. Um,
right.
to use this space to helping me unpack it all
Right.
the time.
Totally.
So like that intuitive thing that you're talking about makes a lot of sense to me. Like, so this may, I don't know, I'm gonna say it. I, f- I
Yeah.
feel like lately the
Mm.
universe has been sending me people like yourself who who are helping me to think through the constant battle in my mind over existence. Um,
Yeah.
I live with generalized anxiety. It is a constant thing for me. Today,
Yeah.
I was like, I was fighting off panic attack this morning. I was fighting off a
Yeah.
panic
I get
attack,
it.
right?
Yeah.
And I thankfully I'm fortunate. I have health insurance. My health insurance helps pay for my therapy. I have a great support system. All those things. So I know I know when the panic attack is coming and how to stave it off, right? Um,
Yeah.
but at the root of all of that is the church. At the root of all of that is my fear of death. This very morning, and this is what I'm saying about this, like it keeps,
Yeah.
maybe it's just me seeking it out, but I feel like it's seeking me out too. This very morning,
Yeah.
I just pulled it up. I have a draft tweet that I'm going to share with everybody because I'm probably not going to actually tweet it. But it was the actor Rainn Wilson. I saw a tweet from him, right? And somebody had responded to it. And he said, I do think there is an anti-Christian bias in Hollywood. As soon as the character, the David character in The Last of Us started reading from the Bible, I knew he was going to be a horrific villain. Are you watching The Last of Us, by the way?
Yeah. No,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. For
Okay.
sure. I love it.
And yeah, I watch it twice. I watch each episode twice and listen to the podcast. And
Okay.
so so he ends this tweet by saying, could there be a Bible reading preacher on a show who is actually loving and kind? And I'm having my morning coffee as I'm reading this. And what I wrote and did not send was, never met a loving or kind Christian preacher. I'm sure they're out there, and I know plenty of loving and kind Christians, but I have yet to meet a preacher that fits such a description.
Yeah. I would I would encourage you, if next time you're in Nashville, Jason and I have found a place here called Grace Point that is a I don't want to call it deconstructionist because I don't know if that's what they would like to be talked as, but I mean he's the most kind and loving and liberal leaning, and like, you know, where like if you were to play this for my grandma, she'd be like, he should be up in flames kind of shit, you know, like
Yeah.
trans affirming, gay affirming, you know, like all these things that are like that he's speaking about and using lessons from the Bible to talk about. And that's what I think the point is. It's like you're using this thing to kind of like talk and teach lessons, but not in this way that's like making you like the guy from Walking Dead, you know, like not everything has to be so fear-based. And so like I think like what you're saying, where it's like the panic attacks and all this kind of stuff, it directly comes from fear
Yes.
based issues with me because I'm so scared of everything. And I think that that's like, or at least was, I mean, I still am to some degree, but like that's what they want you to live in because then you can be controlled
Yeah,
by the church.
100% about control.
Yeah.
And it worked. You know, like I felt very
Yeah.
controlled by it for a long time. And my attitudes about so many things were shaped in such an awful way
Yeah.
by the doctrine that I was being fed constantly. And when you tie it to someone's eternal fucking salvation, then it
Totally.
becomes like, it's just so that's really, I remember the moment in therapy where we had the breakthrough and my therapist was like, wait, what were you taught? And I was explaining it.
Yeah.
I was explaining to her. She's like, you realize that's why you have anxiety, right? Like that's
Yeah.
a direct
Or,
line.
and also too, the other part of all of that is the judgment upon other people all the time, that what they're doing is wrong. And like, my grandfather was a lovely man. I mean, he was one of the most influential people on my life, and I lost him so early in my life, and it sucked. But like, and I realized that a lot of the rhetoric that he was teaching us was just rhetoric that he got from his small town in Alabama, that he, wasn't maybe able to be exposed to something different. And, like, I remember telling him one time, I was so proud. I was like, Dad, I was like, Grandpa, I went to church. And he was like, great, where'd you go? And I was like, Cathedral of Christ the King. And he was like, a Catholic church. And I was like, yeah. And he was like, oh, like, and I was like,
Yeah.
what? And then come to find out that like Baptists think that the Catholics are going to hell because
Yeah.
they pray to, saints and to Mary and all this other kind of stuff. And I'm
That's
like,
what I was taught.
this is so stupid. Like,
Yeah.
this is so stupid.
That's 100% what I was taught, that anybody who wasn't Protestant was going to hell. I mean, even other fucking Christians. It's like, no wonder.
Other Christians.
Yeah. And what are we doing here?
So
all right. Well, speaking of our neurosis, because it took us like 10 minutes to try to figure out microphones, we're about to run out of time. So let me end this, and then if you'll just click the same link, it'll just open back up, if that's cool.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. Hold on. Got it.
Sweet.
We're back.
All right, we're back. Everybody go join the Patreon so I can start paying for Zoom and don't have to do this. All right, I would like to dive into your record.
Yeah.
Half hour in. Let's talk about some music. So I've been listening to it on repeat. It's wonderful. I think there are a few things that stand out to me about it. One is how stylistically there are all these different pieces and they all fit. It all makes sense. I hear like some country politan kind of influence or sound. I hear like some there's like almost 90s country feeling stuff. Here's the term that I hope sticks. I feel like you are the Southern Hope Sandoval. Like that song "Birthday" just feels like I mean that is like the most immense compliment you could probably give anybody. But
thank you.
"Birthday" sounds like it would fit on one of her records. Yeah. And it's maybe my favorite song on the album, even though I think it's fantastic top to bottom, right? Like there's not a you didn't miss. It's 10 tracks of flames. So
thank you.
Can you tell you welcome?
Can I quote you on that?
Yeah.
10 tracks of flames.
10 tracks of flames.
Put that on it.
Sure. Yeah, put on your website or whatever. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's just great. So a couple of things, like as an entry point to kind of having this conversation about the record. I mentioned "Birthday." And there's something that grabs me about that particular song. Can you tell me about that song, how it came together?
Yeah. So "Birthday" is the last track on the record, and we recorded that just me and electric guitar in a room together, and that's how it started here in this room that I'm in right now. And so I met Jason when I was 22, and we very quickly connected with each other, like that night we're making out kind of situation.
Yeah.
And then spent every day with each other for like the next month. And then on his birthday, the following month, he had told me like, hey, I think I'm like struggling with some substance stuff. And I had just, been still in the throes of dealing with my mom and all of her shit. And I was like, nope, I'm out of here. I was like, okay. And I had this kind of idea that was happening, but then I just was like, no, I'm not doing it. So I grabbed all Jason jokes, like I was like, I'm taking my lost DVDs and my quilts and like I'm hitting the road, and I did. And that was on his birthday, which was like really poor form. But then the next 9 months, we kind of ran in similar circles in Atlanta, and we would see each other out, we would text each other, and like I would be with somebody else and he was with somebody else, but we were just constantly like kind of like fucking with each other's emotions, and then finally got back together that following October and have been together ever since. But
Wow.
I just think that I was thinking about like how sometimes when you fall in love with someone, like it's not necessarily your choice. And there are these like, you know, again, going back to like the fear thing, like it's fucking scary. Like
Yeah.
all of a sudden to be like, oh my God, like I really like this human and I don't really know what my life, I don't know what if I want to know what my life would look like without them in it. And that can be really scary, especially when people that you've loved in your life have hurt you, parental figures and other things like that. And I had never been in like a relationship, really. I mean, I was 22. It was the first time that I met someone that I fell in love with, and that was Jason. And
Wow.
we're still here. So, but I just knew it, and I think he knew it too. And it's not to say that our marriage has not been, easy. Because it definitely, marriage is not easy, but like, yeah, we just kind of found each other. So that was about when I broke up with him on his birthday.
No wonder I like it so much.
Yeah.
I think you touched on something that like it took me until the last couple of years to kind of get my head around, which is that so much of even really consequential and beautiful things in life are not choices, that they happen to you. And I've like, once I got in my head this, and this is something I've been dealing with as I think about my parents aging, and my father's health has been, both of them going through a lot of health issues. It's been really hard on me. And I have a very complicated relationship with both of them. But one of the things that I finally came to a place of understanding about that has helped me is like, I didn't choose to be born. like I didn't choose to be here. And that once you get your head around some of like that, then it helped me to understand so many moments in my life that I really had no agency over, or very little agency in those moments. They just happened. And many of them are the best moments in my life. And many of them are incredibly rich, and I'm grateful for them. But, same thing. When I fell in love with my partner, I wasn't looking. I was having fun. That the last thing I was looking for was somebody
like,
to spend the rest of, I wasn't trying to spend the rest of my life with one woman. 9 years
I know,
later,
I was 22.
Well, I was 32.
I was like, I looked the best I ever looked in my life, and I was like just out, just slaying it. And then I was like, oh, cool. Like 22, great. And then we got married when I was 25. And maybe it's like what you're saying is that it's not that you didn't choose it, but like sometimes I feel like maybe what I have to like think about is like why, if I do believe in like a higher source or something that is faded out for me, like why this is my path. Like what is this lesson that I'm learning in this lifetime or this lifeline that I need to take with me to the next, or whatever it is. And whether it's dealing with your parents and having a complicated relationship or complicated marriage, or or I don't know,
Both.
I don't know that those are choices that we are ever allowed to make. They are kind of already made for us, maybe, and we have to deal with them. And that's part of our lesson.
That makes a lot of sense. I think so much of it is just how we react to them. They happen to us, and then we do have some agency over how we react to them. It's something I work with kids, and it's one of the things that I really try to stress upon them is like so much, even more of their lives just happens to them. And and the adults in their lives make stupid decisions often. And, on a macro level and on a micro level. And that for them, the only thing they have control over is how they react to those things most of the time.
Yeah.
But I think those lessons are true for us as grown people too.
I had a friend who would always say, rather than saying, why is this happening to me, say, why is this happening for me? And try and shift the way that you think about, the things that happen. And, I try to do that sometimes whenever things feel difficult or weird, Anyway. So.
Okay, so let's zoom out a little bit and talk just about your creative process more generally. You look like you're sitting in a room where stuff gets made quite a bit. And this may be a
What do you
box of
mean?
CDs or records in the back there.
Oh, this is a massive. This is all my vinyl, all the
Sweet,
CDs. This is all the
sweet.
shipping stuff that I have to do. Yeah,
Right. Um,
there's a lot, but there are guitars. There's other stuff you can't see, but
yeah. So birthday, you just told us this story. That's a story from quite some time ago. Can like, what does the writing process look like for you? Are those ideas percolating for many years? Are you a sit down and do the work every day kind of person? What's your process like?
definitely not a sit down, do the work every day type of person as much as I wish that I was.
Mhm.
That was another thing, kind of like learning curve and coming to Nashville was trying to make time to be creative. And Parker Kaysen, who produced the record, he was very much like, let's put dates on the books. You come, we try and write songs. And that was super foreign to me and very terrifying because I don't
Mm.
really generally like to work like that.
Mhm.
I'm more of a private writer and I would, just kind of mess around with things and then take it to someone else when I felt like it was a more formed idea rather than being incredibly exposed and vulnerable in front of people when you're throwing out brainstorming ideas and lyrics that might sound stupid or whatever. Like
Yeah.
that was just something I wasn't interested in, but I'm so glad that like we did it together and that I found this safe space with Parker and Jason, my husband as well. Like, we would get together and write things and it took me out of that headspace. I was definitely like creative process sometimes is like something will just I woke up out of a dream last week and came in here and wrote a song and
Mm.
like it was so weird and that had never happened before.
Like in the middle of the night,
um
or were you taking a nap? Like
it
what?
was at 7 o'clock in the morning and it was just like there and then I was like
Uh,
bah, and I like ran in here, figured it all out, wrote all the lyrics out. And sometimes it's like that, like sometimes it can just be so easy, but then other times it is not. And like Birthday was a song that was just easy. It was obviously locked somewhere in my brain and it just came out and that was the way that it was is the way that it is on the record.
mm.
But other songs take more pulling out of you and more you know um thought. I don't know how to say it.
Yeah.
It's harder sometimes to pull other ones out. So I think, I've already started thinking about writing the next record and like what I want to do. And I definitely want to like spend more time and be intentional with my creative process rather than it be something that just, like we said, happens to me, but
Yeah.
be something that just like I can be more active in, and again, I think that opens up an energy to you that allows for whatever, inspiration that you can get to enter. Um, Hopefully, at least.
Were any of the songs on People Talk, uh, the difficult ones, like you just mentioned, the ones that maybe took a little bit more elbow grease or effort or whatever?
I think that I'm trying to remember, like, I think that Only Nice When I'm High, the music kind of was there. And I had the first, like, I had the idea for the song. I knew what I wanted it to be like, but getting the lyrics right, I remember I really spent a lot of time trying to make those be something that I was like proud of. I didn't want it to just be a song about like smoking weed. It was like, it was definitely wanted it to feel more like a song of like trying to get help for your anxiety. And so I definitely spent more time on that one.
I like that
And
about
I
that
think
song. I like that there's like it does present on its face at least as like just a song about weed, but
yeah,
after one listen you realize like, oh no, there's a lot more here. She's unpacking a lot more
yeah,
here.
yeah. I had a lady yell at me once. We were out in Colorado playing on tour last year, and she was like,
Mm.
marijuana is a gateway drug. And I was like, well, if you would actually listen to the song, you would know that it's much less about marijuana and much more about anxiety. And,
Yeah.
anyway, so whatever.
Did you say that to her?
It's no. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then it's like she was right in the front, and turns out she was just hammered and she was annoying everyone around her. So
Right.
sometimes you just gotta let people fall on their own sword. when it's like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was another one that I'd wanted to ask you about, so I'm glad you brought it up because it is another standout track for me. And again, the whole thing's great, but Leona is another one I really love that I connected with for whatever reason. Can you tell me about that one?
So Leona is a song that Parker wrote.
Okay.
The Parker Casey produced the record.
Yeah.
And we were at his house on one of these, like, you know, writing dates or whatever. And he played it for Jason and I was like, can I sing that song? Like, it just grabbed me from the, you know, immediately. And I was like, this is so fucking cool. I love the chords in it. And I was so grateful to him that he let me record it on this record and is kind of, you know, I guess I wouldn't say giving it to me, but I'm borrowing it for a long time. But I love singing that song. It was super hard for me to record it because vocally it was all over the place. But it was one of those where it just like really, I had to get out of my head. I had to get out of my fear, all the stuff, and just like go for it. And that's the same thing that happens live when we perform it. Like, I don't play anything on it. I grab the microphone and it becomes this, like, it's just such a powerful song. And the whole band feels it when we play it. It's just like, it's just such a good song. And I can say that about it because I didn't write it. So I can talk about it.
I like, well, I think it is your vocal that really lands with me on that particular song. And, you know, you through the whole record, you cover a lot of vocal territory. Like, it seems like it feels effortless, you know, when I'm listening to it, but it's interesting to hear you say that you sort of, because when I think of your singing and having seen you play live a couple of times, I think you have such an incredible voice and such a unique voice. It sounds like there's a little bit of maybe I don't know what the word is for it. Maybe it's a little bit of anxiety, as we've mentioned, about maybe taking some of those chances. But you cover so much ground vocally on this record.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, like,
I think like one that was like Nobody But Me, like that one was another one that was really hard to do vocally because it's low in my register when it starts. And then I go to full on screaming at the end of it. So that one was kind of crazy. But yeah, there's, you know, there was a lot of just having to get out of my own head about what I've done in the past and just be like, who cares? You don't have to sing like a country singer anymore.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And there's moments where you do, but then there's like also moments that there's a I forget exactly which song it is, but there's a song that almost feels like it could be an 80s pop song. You know, there's like, I guess the title track. Yeah, exactly. Right. Feels like it could be, you know, and something Madonna singing or something, you know, and it's great and it fits. But that's so fascinating about this record is how you did cover stylistically. Like it feels it's so interesting to hear you talk about because it feels fearless. You know, it feels like you just like went for it, you know. So
well, I think that we kind of did in some way, but just know that it wasn't easy.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it wasn't.
I'm so glad that it does.
Yeah, I think that's great. You know, it's great. You had like you clearly put a ton of work into this. Hearing you talk about it, and yet the finished product, I mean, it just sounds so good. Everything sounds so good. The band sounds on point. I don't know who all is playing on it, but like the band sounds on point. All the production choices are great. It's mixed perfectly. Like and then, you know, the songs are outstanding and you sing the hell out of them.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So you mentioned sort of like the past, and we've talked a little bit about Whiskey Gentry. We've talked a little bit about sort of your career, and the evolution of that career. As you look back on your career, if someone was making a documentary about it up to this point, what are like 2 or 3 scenes that would have to be a part of that documentary?
Ooh.
This is my new it's my new question. I get all my guests off guard with. I love it.
Oh man. I mean, definitely, God, why does it make me feel so emotional all of a sudden? I mean, definitely like the years with Whiskey Gentry, if you were going to do a montage, would definitely have to be something, because I wouldn't be the person that I am without the years that I spent with them, and just the love that we all have for each other, and the vulnerability we were able to be with each other. And they're my family forever. We'll be friends till we die. And like, and it was sad. I think maybe like, if you want a specific moment, I think probably the last show that we ever did together was at Variety Playhouse in Atlanta. And we were all like so emotional, but like happy, that it happened. And I don't know, just it felt good. It was our Christmas show, and it was sad, but it wasn't at the same time. And we have this great picture of all of us bowing together at the end, and like, just felt like the perfect end to that story. But and then definitely the other one would be moving here. Jason and I played a show up here in 2017 for Oh Boy Records, and it was a benefit show, and like Corey Brandon was there, Jason Isbell, Amanda, a ton of people, and we were so welcomed by all of them. And like that night, Jason and I were laying in my friend's guest bed, and we were like, should we move to Nashville? Like, should we just do it? And then less than 2 months later, we had moved. We packed everything and moved up here. And picture Jason and I both in separate cars on 75 North, just north of Atlanta, calling each other and crying. So we were like, what are we doing? Like, this is insane. And like, but it was like, it just happened. And it was like, we're doing it. And there was just no like looking back. And I'm so thankful, that I have a partner who supported that, and, who stood aside to, let his ego go. And, because he was such a front part of Whiskey Gentry, and it was his idea for me to go solo. So I think all of those things, if you were making a documentary, that would be like Jason going like, you should be a solo artist, and me going, no way. And then him having to prove it to me that I could, So.
Do you, now that you have the benefit of a little bit of hindsight, and I'm asking this half selfishly because we're very seriously considering moving somewhere, mostly because of the wild laws in Florida, and just the.
Well, don't come to Tennessee
I know,
right now.
I know. That's what we talked about.
God.
That's what we talked about. Is where the fuck do you go now? And we don't like the cold. You got to move where it's cold, and we don't like the cold. Like I love Vermont, but in the summer, like Minnesota's great.
Right?
I got friends there, but I don't think I'd survive a winter.
Right.
I think
I don't think I would.
if the physical cold didn't get me, the seasonal depression would.
Right. 100%. Yeah.
But now that you have like the benefit of hindsight, you mentioned how emotional that move was. You grew up, in Atlanta. You had this whole band in Atlanta. You had this whole thing. You met your partner in life there. Is it, when you look back, was Nashville the right move?
1000%.
Okay.
1000%. Like there was a lot, things that get me really choked up, right? It's like when I had to sit down with my best friend, we've been friends for 30 years. She was 7 months pregnant. And I was like, I'm moving to Nashville. And she was like, when? And I was like, in a month. And her crying and me crying, and like, and the things that you like miss, right? It's like, I don't live right down the street from her anymore. She just had another baby. I haven't met him yet. Like there's a lot of things, my mom and my brother and his kids, and my family, being in Atlanta, those things are hard, but for us I have met some of the most incredible people here. I've met some of the most incredible women here, which I thought moving here in my early 30s, I was like, well, I won't make friends. I was like, it's impossible to make girlfriends, anyway. But then like, not impossible, but like I have like 5 best friends, right? And so it's like, and we all live all over the country, but it's like, I just am so grateful for these women here that we all are just like so like-minded, and they're just like my best girlfriends. Like I talk to them every day, and we just, like I said, I mean, the community, the way that this town has welcomed us and supported us, I never felt that way in Atlanta. Even though
Mm,
I was from there, I never felt supported by the community in some way. Like it felt so more cutthroat in some weird way. Like if
interesting.
somebody else was getting success, then that meant that you weren't. And that's just not the way that it feels here at all.
Wow.
So,
I'm so glad to hear you say that. And um that whole thing about friends. I mean, so you said it's hard to make girlfriends. It's hard for men to make friends later too. Like
yeah.
I've really been leaning into reaching out to my friends, making connections with them. Cause like so many folks as you get older, one, we just don't make the effort anymore. You have your partner in life and that's my best friend. And I talk to her all the time, of course. But I need to be able to go talk to somebody else about like, can you believe what she did? Or whatever, like whatever,
Totally. No,
I
yes.
need
Men
those
need
things.
that too. Yeah,
Yeah. And
you do. And that's
it's
like
hard.
Jason moved here. Yeah. Well, like Jason was in his early 40s moving here. He's 10 years older than me. And so
Mhm.
for him, and all of his friends were all friends that he had since he was in, middle school. And
Yeah.
they're thick as thieves in Atlanta. And so for him to move here, I think it definitely hit him harder. But even now, I'm like, Jason, the guy friends that you have here would like take a bullet for you. Not that your ones wouldn't in Atlanta, but like,
Mm,
you guys all men need that support network as well. And I
yeah.
think that he gets that from his friends here too.
Yeah.
And again, having that kind of like common denominator of like, we're all playing this music game together, that now he can even has other people that he can talk to about that or get excited with about that. And it's different. But
Yeah. I'm so glad y'all found that community. And that is in the times that I do visit Nashville, that's the vibe I get. I'm not living in it, so it's hard for me to say whether that would be accurate for me if I ever ended up there. But yeah, again, unfortunately, the politics are so fucked up because like otherwise that would be our town. Like that would be our kind of town. Anyway, but so
unfortunate, because I feel like Nashville as a town is your kind of, it's my kind of town. It's all of our friends kind of town.
yeah.
It's everywhere, or like it's all the other things that are muddying that and making it scary.
Well,
It just sucks.
frankly, Orlando is my kind of town too. I mean, Orlando is a great place to live. It's a very progressive place. It's this sort of like little, liberal oasis in the middle of the craziness that is Florida. And the cities in general
Right.
are here as well, but we just have
Right.
a comic book villain as a governor. Um,
Right.
so
Who might be our president?
yeah, I wouldn't worry about
Let's not
that.
even go there.
Yeah, we don't have to go
I'm
there, but
moving to Norway.
I know. I wouldn't worry about that. Wait, I'm just telling you, and this is not just my bias. He is so unlikable. He is so bad in front of a microphone. He is so bad on a stage. I mean, he is
Yeah.
miserable in front of a camera. And nationally, he's going to get exposed. You got to have that charisma of something, even if it's weird charisma like Trump has. Like you have to have something.
Right.
People go like, that guy's funny or whatever. DeSantis will tell a joke and he'll just sit
Right.
there and like, you didn't realize he delivered the punchline. Like he's so awkward. There's no way he'll be president. He's just going to torture us. Don't worry about it.
Ugh.
He's just going to torture me for the rest of my life. He's going to end up
Totally.
my
Okay, well, you
senator.
keep it.
Yeah, he's going to end up being my
Yeah.
senator. He's going to end up like just taking on Rubio or something, who's also very unlikable, or Scott, who's also very unlikable. Anyway, what are you getting down on? What is the art? We always ask what the art you're inspired by at the moment is. Like, could be music you're listening to. It could be, a show. We mentioned The Last of Us, the greatest TV show ever earlier, or like something that's got you fired up right now.
Oh man. So I have started a challenge this year to read more books. I was an English major and I read so much through college, and then got busy like kind of writing music and stuff. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's like one thing, but I have been I think reading for me does something where and maybe it's with everybody, but like it starts me thinking, and like it activates some part in my brain that I start thinking about ideas for songs, or maybe it's something that I read in a book, or something. It starts everything kind of like moving. So that's been really good, and I've really, really enjoyed it so far. Like, I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed reading, because I was doing a lot of video game playing, and I still love to watch TV, and I watch a shit ton of TV too. But like, yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but it's not just one thing. But I would say like, reading for me lately, fiction. It's mainly been fiction. Although I did read finally Patti Smith's book, Just Kids, and it absolutely floored me.
I got it up there on the shelf behind me.
Beautiful, beautiful book. I mean, like I get chills just talking about it. Like,
it's
the
stunning.
way that she writes, it's stunning. And I'd had it on my shelf for years.
Yeah.
And never picked it up. And then finally, because I'm not saying that I'm a huge Patti Smith fan. I know, basically the main songs that she's written.
Same.
I picked it up and blasted through it in like 2 days. I was just stunned.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because similar earlier last year, I saw it. My ritual is I go to Park Ave CDs, this wonderful record store and bookstore in Orlando, and they have a small but very cool book selection, right? So I read something, and it's also, not that Patty's from Florida, but there's like pretty Florida heavy, Florida centric, like they promote authors like Kristen Arnett and Jeff Vandermeer and all these folks that are Florida authors. So I always grab whatever strikes me. And that one is one that has just like in the back of my mind, I got to read Just Kids at some point. And I never picked it up for whatever reason. And finally I did. And it just gives you so much. But I think just in general, I mean, we talk about books on this show quite a bit, and I try to have authors on as often as possible, but I like that you were more general with your answer, because there is very little that nurtures me more than books. There's very little that nurtures all the things I need nurturing than books, fiction and nonfiction. They give and they give and they give, and I like to have them on my shelf, and I like to be around them. I've got 3 of them on my nightstand now, I got that stack.
I know. Yeah. I know, and I was so like anti, because I had to sadly get rid of a lot of my books when we moved here, because I just like, it was either like, Lauren, are you taking all of your vinyl, or are you taking all of these books that you're never going to read again? And so, but yeah, I mean, I've got them all through here, and every, ones that I've kept that are special. And I just recently though have started downloading books, and I feel like a traitor. But it is easier to be on the road, like if I'm like traveling or like on an airplane, like it is easier rather than keeping like 3 books, like I can't do that when I'm on tour. So I do feel like a traitor, but you know what? It still is giving me all I need inside and in my head,
right.
I'm still reading.
I haven't done it yet. And I keep thinking it would be good for me too, but I haven't done it yet. There's something about, I don't just holding the book.
I get it. I know. I totally get it. I totally get it. I am the same way. I love holding a book, but yeah, I just was like, I'm going to load up this iPad. We're going to leave for tour in like 2 weeks. Like, just got all my Goodreads. Are you on Goodreads?
No.
That app where you follow people?
I'll do it though.
It's good. You should get on it, and then I'll follow you too. But like, it's good because you can explore what other people are reading and what they like. And anyway, we could have this full-on nerd combo for a while.
I know. Well, I don't want to take much more of your time. This has been such a pleasure. I do wonder, since we're having so much fun, if for the next 7 minutes or so, we've been doing this thing, if it flows like this, where I just ask the guest childlike questions, like favorite food and pizza, or like favorite.
Okay.
Favorite pizza.
You
favorite
already
food
said
and
pizza.
I already said pizza. Is that yours? Okay, cool. So we're already there. I like somehow I answered the question with what I wanted. It's very childlike.
Yeah, exactly.
But we just put it on Patreon. So if you're cool with that, and for the next 7 minutes, I'd love to ask you just silly questions. What about favorite color?
Do it. Oh,
people talk anyway.
y'all. Thank you so much, Lauren. Thank all of you for listening. LaurenMorrow.com for all things Lauren Morrow. MarinadePodcast.com for all things The Marinade, including written pieces, photography, our online store, and more. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Spoutable, and Twitter. Subscribe and give us a 5-star rating on your podcast app. Tell a friend about the show. These are all free ways to support The Marinade. If you really like what we're doing and can swing it, please consider joining our Patreon community. For just $2 a month, as little as $2 a month, you can gain access to Patreon exclusive content like our show, Jason's Journey, where I talk about the moments that shape my creative life and provide a window into the process of making The Marinade. We also have a brand new monthly show called What We're Getting Down On. It's a conversation between me and my good friend Peter Harrelson about the art that has us fired up at the moment, and we are having a blast with it. Also check out our show Inner Child, where I ask our guests childlike questions such as favorite food, TV show, dream car, silly stuff like that. There's one with Lauren actually up right now on Patreon. Again, just as little as $2 a month, you can join the Patreon community. If you want to support the show financially, but do not want to commit to a monthly subscription, I totally get that. You can Venmo or PayPal us. It's just at The Marinade, and all the money goes right back into the making of the show. Right now, that means saving up to cover some festivals. We have been invited to some very cool events. I need to figure out how to pay for those experiences. But above all, y'all, we're just super thankful that you listen and spread the word about The Marinade. I'm incredibly grateful. Until next time, go out and create something. Cheers, y'all.